Okay, so what I'm presenting today is something that I incorporated into a project that I'm working on called olfactory memory. Whoops, actually, let me go back here. And so if you look at the first panel on the first page, I drew a bowl, or I guess a crock pot with cider in it. And this was actually right after Procreate came out with the ability to do the liquify function. So I was able to actually do some distortions on my original drawing to create what looks like ripples on top of the liquid, as kind of a good way of pre-planning things in my penciling stage before I get to inking it. So I just wanted to kind of show you how I would do that, and a few of the other liquify functions as well. So what I've done here is I've just created a spoon and a bowl. And if you see in the upper left-hand corner, there's all these different icons. One looks like a magic wand. So if you select that one, they've towards the tail end of the list, there's this item called Liquify. Now, it defaults to doing what's called push right here. And so if you go ahead and just move things around, whoops, and as you can see, this is not exactly what I wanted. It's a little bit bigger than I wanted. Actually, I think like if I turn off the momentum, reduce the size, then we can get something that may be a little bit closer to what I wanted there. So you get a little bit of distortion there, and you can keep resetting it and redoing it until you get something that you like. So, and I know this is something that is available on Photoshop as well. I don't do as much work on that, but I'll kind of show you some of that as well. But before I do that, there's a bunch of different loadable functions on Photoshop that do a few other things. So if you see on the bottom there, there's other tools like twirl right. So if you hold your stylus on top of something, it'll, rotate things to the right, or you could do it the opposite way, rotating things to the left. A pinch, so if it'll kind of pucker in. Expand is the opposite of that. So if you drew a picture and you think that the character's nose doesn't look quite big enough, you can just put that on top of it. Or if you're trying to figure out how to create something that looks like a bug bite or something like that. Crystals, this is a new one. I just played with this morning, so I hadn't really thought about it. So this is one where you don't hold your stylus down, but you kind of drag it along. And it doesn't really show up very well. I think I need to increase the size. That's why the size was so big earlier, because I was playing with some of these other things. But it creates a little bit of distortion. So like if you want something to look a little bit like it's freezing, like on top of the water, that might be a good one to use. And then, actually, let me show you. So edge, I'm not exactly sure what it's doing, but like if you wanted to create something that looks like a water damaged paper with a bunch of wrinkles on it, like if you're doing a watercolor on a thin paper, that might be a good effect to use. But reconstruct kind of undoes a lot of the liquify. So let's say you're like, oh, I went a little bit too far. You can kind of fix it a little bit. So as you drag the reconstruct across your drawing, then it puts it back to what it was. But if you don't want to fix the whole thing, if you want to fix the whole thing, just hit reset. So let me go ahead and stop share here, and then I'm going to share my Photoshop and show you that you can kind of do the same thing here.
Oh, this is awesome, Stan.
Yeah. So you
that
see
reconstruct
here,
is cool.
Drag it, and then so a lot of the things that I showed you, you actually have to download on Photoshop as a load mesh option. And I actually just downloaded installed Photoshop fairly recently because I got a new computer. So I don't have any of the mesh options. And I never used any of the Liquify options in my previous computer. So I don't have anything to load from my old files or anything like that. one of the things they also have, and this is really more for photographs, but they have this thing called face-aware Liquify. So it actually does a lot of the things that I think some of people's Google chat type of filters, where you can make people's ears big and eyes big and things like that. But it identifies areas of faces and things like that. So I don't really consider those to be your typical professional effects that you might use on Photoshop. But if you're, you know, learning to be a caricature artist, this might be a good thing to use just to kind of figure out how you could, you know, maybe exaggerate things and what looks good for caricature purposes. But don't just use that as an end product, because if you upload something like that on a Facebook page full of caricature artists, we will call you out on that. So anyway, does anyone have any questions for me?
Yeah, you have a little bit of time, so if anybody wants to jump in and ask a couple quick questions. Does anyone have a question about that? I thought it was really, really cool instead of having to draw.
Stan, while you've got the Photoshop version open, you might show the same thing with, trying to find where they put it, with the softer edge brush is what I was trying to suggest.
Oh, yeah. So you can adjust a lot of these options up here, brush tools. Let me undo this real quick.
Is it density that they call it now?
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. So let's see. Whoops. Let me. Well, and you know what I should do is actually use my Wacom brush here, because
oh yeah, so you have
I
pressure.
was just using my mouse, but you have pressure sensitivity, so I'm going really light right now, but if I add some pressure to it, then it drags it a little bit more. And I think that the density is what affects that. And then of course you can adjust the pressure so that it's either less or more pressure sensitive. So if you end up being one of those people that doesn't really have confidence in your ability to use the pressure sensitivity function, you can kind of tone that down a little bit, you know. So right now, as I turned it down, I'm pressing pretty hard, but you can see it's not really moving it very much right now because I turned the pressure down.
And you might show what happens with a really big brush size too.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that's what I started with on Procreate.
On Procreate,
yeah.
Okay.
Let's go with a real big brush size. Maybe that's too big.
You're gonna turn that bowl inside out.
Yes. Whoa. But this is something that you can also do with a mask on. So if you use your, so if I get out of this and I, oops, oh, my screen sharing has stopped. But if you use a mask tool on Photoshop, then you can actually incorporate that into your Liquify so that you won't be touching anything that you masked. So, and whoops, I kind of lost everything here because I'm not on Zoom anymore. Where's my main screen there? All right, let's see if I can get back to it.
So a minute and a half left.
Okay, so yeah, like if you wanted to go ahead and use like a lasso tool to mask something off so that you don't affect some things or whatever. So let's say we don't want to affect this part of the bowl. Here, and I'll just do this really quickly since I'm running out of time. And then we can go back to, so it's under filter and then Liquify right there. So we go back to Liquify. You can see that it masked everything off here. So you can switch it so that, let's invert it here. And then let's see, so it'll only move the stuff that hasn't been masked. So fun stuff.
All right, that was very helpful. I'm definitely going to be using that.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Stan.